Hello, and welcome to the World War Lab channel. Today's story takes us to the skies over India in the final months of 1943, where one young pilot faced impossible odds and had only seconds to decide the fate of an entire airfield. At 9:27 a.m. on December 13, 1943, Second Lieutenant Philip Adair pulled his Curtiss P-40N Warhawk into a climbing turn above Assam, India, just as 64 Japanese aircraft emerged from the thin morning haze 3 miles to the east, flying straight toward his home base at Dinjan Airfield. Adair was only 23 years old, but had already completed 43 combat missions with the 89th Fighter Squadron, flying escort and protection for the dangerous hump airlift routes. This morning, however, he was completely alone in the air when the enemy formation appeared. Over the previous 8 weeks, Japanese air raids across northeast India had destroyed 47 Allied transport aircraft on the ground and killed 112 personnel. His P-40, named Lulu Belle and marked with the number 44, carried 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns and enough ammunition for only about 12 seconds of continuous fire. The incoming enemy force consisted of 24 Mitsubishi Ki, 21 Sally bombers, escorted by roughly 40 Nakajima Ki, 43 Oscar fighters flying in layered formations above and below the bomber stream. Intelligence reports had shown that raids of similar size in Burma had achieved up to 90% effectiveness against undefended airfields. Below him, Dinjan Airfield held 14 C-47 transport aircraft loaded with critical supplies destined for Chiang Kai-shek's forces in China, a field hospital treating 63 wounded soldiers, and fuel reserves capable of sustaining hump operations for 11 days. If the bombers reached the airfield unchallenged, the destruction would cripple Allied supply operations across the Himalayas for weeks. The nearest friendly fighters were stationed at Jorhat, 38 minutes away by air. Adair glanced at his fuel gauge. His internal tanks were full, holding 180 gallons, giving him about 90 minutes of flight time at combat power. The Japanese formation flew 3,000 feet below him, moving at roughly 240 miles per hour. Standard combat doctrine dictated that a fighter pilot should wait for reinforcements if outnumbered by more than 5 to 1. Adair faced odds of 64 to 1. He could radio for help and shadow the formation until backup arrived, but by then the bombs would already be falling. Or he could attack alone and try to disrupt their bombing run before it ever reached Dinjan. Adair pushed the throttle forward without hesitation. His Allison V-1710 engine answered instantly, the manifold pressure climbing to 54 inches as the P-40 surged ahead. The Warhawk accelerated to 320 miles per hour as he positioned himself 4,000 feet above the bombers, approaching from the south with the sun directly behind him. The Oscar fighters had not seen him yet. Their attention was locked forward, fixed on the target. He had one advantage, and it was everything: surprise. The Japanese pilots expected resistance near the target, not 20 miles out. Adair quickly formed his plan. He would strike the lead bomber group first and ignore the fighters as long as possible. The goal was not to destroy the entire formation, but to break their bombing accuracy, force them to scatter, and disrupt their timing. If he could make them lose cohesion, the attack might fail. Could a single P-40 truly disrupt 64 enemy aircraft? Like this video to see how it turns out. Subscribe for more stories. And now let's return to Adair. The lead group of Sally bombers flew in a tight formation of 6 aircraft, arranged in 2 V-shaped elements 3. Adair rolled inverted, lowered the nose, and dove on them from their high 7 o'clock position. His airspeed climbed rapidly, 360 miles per hour and rising. The Allison engine screamed at full power as the distance closed fast. The bomber crews still had no idea he was there. At 800 yards, Adair opened fire. His 6.50 calibers thundered, sending bright tracer rounds arcing into the lead bomber. The bullet stitched up the Sally's left wing. Fabric ripped apart. Metal flashed with sparks, and then the bomber's left engine burst into a sheet of orange flame. Thick black smoke poured from the cowling as the formation shattered. Bombers veered left and right, their neat V dissolving into chaos. Adair pulled sharply upward, 7GS slamming him into his seat, then rolled hard to the right. 40 Oscar fighters were already diving toward him. The Nakajima Ki 43 Oscar was among the most agile fighters in the Pacific. Powered by a Nakajima HA 115 engine delivering 1,150 horsepower, it could reach 329 miles per hour at 13,000 feet and turn tighter than any American fighter. Its distinctive butterfly combat flaps allowed it to shed speed rapidly during turns without stalling, a deadly advantage Japanese pilots used mercilessly. In the previous 6 months alone, Oscar fighters had shot down 63 Allied aircraft over Burma and northeast India. Adair's P-40N was faster in straight-line speed, but could not match the Oscar's turning ability. Its Allison V-1710-81 engine produced 1,240 horsepower at 3,000 RPM, giving the Warhawk a top speed of 378 miles per hour below 12,000 feet. But in a prolonged turning fight, the heavier American fighter would bleed energy far faster than the light and nimble Japanese machines. Standard P-40 tactics against Oscars were simple. Never turn with them. Use speed, strike fast, extend away, then reset. Adair could not afford to extend away. If he fled, the bombers would regroup and continue their run toward Dinjan. He had to keep pressure on them, keep them scattered, and keep them uneasy, even if it meant fighting 40 Oscar fighters alone. The first 4 Oscars attacked in a loose finger-4 formation from his high 10 o'clock. Adair rolled left, pulled his nose upward, and fired a 2-second burst at the lead fighter. The .50 caliber rounds passed just high. The Oscar snapped into a right brake, its wingman following close behind. Adair reversed direction and dove to preserve his speed. 2 more Oscars dropped in from above. He spotted them at 400 yards, pulled into a climbing left turn, and fired again, but scored no hits. His ammunition counter showed 800 rounds remaining across all 6 guns, giving him roughly 6 more firing passes at his current rate. Behind the fighter screen, the Sally bombers were already trying to reform. 3 groups of 6 aircraft were closing in, attempting to rebuild their bombing formation. If they succeeded, they would resume their attack. Adair had perhaps 90 seconds before they reached their bomb release point over Dinjan. He rolled out of his turn, slammed the throttle fully forward, and dubbed back toward the bombers. 8 Oscar fighters followed him down. The P-40 accelerated to 405 miles per hour in the dive, a speed the Oscars could not match. He pulled ahead, leveled out at bomber altitude, and lined up on the right-hand Sally formation. The range dropped to 300 yards. Adair opened fire. Tracer rounds converged on the lead bomber's right engine. The Mitsubishi HA-101 radial detonated in a violent fireball. The bomber rolled sharply to the right, trailing flame and debris as its wingman broke formation to avoid a collision. Adair kicked hard on the rudder, skidding left, and swung his guns toward another Sally. He fired again. His rounds tore through the bomber's thin fuselage skin as if it were paper. The Ki-21 had no armor protecting its crew and no self-sealing fuel tanks. Designed back in 1936, it was already obsolete by 1943, yet it could still carry 2,250 pounds of bombs, more than enough to wipe Dinjan Airfield off the map. The Oscar fighters were closing once more, 12 of them this time. Adair glanced at his fuel gauge. 162 gallons remaining. His ammunition counter showed 650 rounds. The bombers were 19 miles from Dinjan. He had maybe 4 minutes before they reached their release point. Then a new warning appeared. His engine temperature began to climb. The Allison V-1710-81 was a liquid-cooled engine. Coolant circulated through channels in the cylinder heads and engine block, absorbing heat from combustion, then passed through a radiator mounted beneath the fuselage. At combat power settings above 50 inches of manifold pressure, the engine generated extreme heat. The cooling system was designed to survive about 20 minutes at those settings. Adair had already been running at full power for 11 minutes. His coolant temperature gauge crept past 230 degrees Fahrenheit. Normal was 210. At 250, engine failure became likely. He had three choices: reduce power and let the engine cool, abandon the fight and head for home, or keep attacking and risk losing the engine over enemy territory. The Sally bombers were still 17 miles from Dinjan, still within striking distance, still deadly. Adair kept the throttle forward. Two Oscars charged straight at him head-on. Their closing speed exceeded 600 miles per hour. Both opened fire at 500 yards. Adair saw their muzzle flashes, thin streams of 7.7 millimeters tracers walking toward his nose. He fired back. His .50 caliber rounds carried far more energy and had greater reach. At 350 yards, his bullets slammed into the left Oscar's engine cowling. The lightweight fighter shuddered violently and broke left, trailing a plume of white coolant vapor. Its wingman followed it away. Adair rolled right in dove. His coolant temperature hit 240 degrees. The Sally bombers were now 15 miles from their target. Two formations of 6 aircraft had managed to reform into bombing Vs. The third group was still scattered, 3 bombers struggling to regroup. Adair went after the lead formation again. 6 Oscars tried to cut him off. He dove straight past them at 390 miles per hour, too fast for them to follow. At bomber altitude, he leveled out and opened fire on the lead Sally. His first burst struck the bomber's right wing root. The internal structure failed instantly. The outer wing panel folded upward and tore completely away. The bomber rolled inverted and dropped into a spinning dive. No parachutes appeared. The crew went down with the aircraft. The formation shattered once more. Bombers scattered in 3 different directions. Their bombing accuracy was destroyed. Even if they dropped their bombs now, the explosions would be spread across miles of jungle instead of being concentrated on the airfield. Adair pulled up hard. His coolant temperature gauge read 248 degrees. The engine began to run rough. He could feel vibration through the control stick. Detonation was starting inside the cylinders, pre-ignition caused by excessive heat. If he didn't reduce power soon, the engine would seize. 8 Oscars dove at him from above. He saw them late. He rolled left, but too slowly. 7.7 millimeters rounds ripped into his right wing. Fabric shredded, metal bent and buckled. 1 round struck the control rod for his right aileron. The controls felt soft and unresponsive. He had to apply much more right stick pressure just to stay level. Another burst walked up the fuselage. Bullets sparked against the engine cowling. 1 round penetrated the coolant reservoir behind the firewall. Green coolant sprayed across his windscreen. The temperature gauge climbed past 260 degrees. Steam burst from the seams of the engine cowling. Oil pressure dropped. The Allison was dying. Adair slammed the throttle back. Engine RPM fell from 3,000 to 2,400. It was no longer producing enough power to maintain altitude. The P-40 began to descend, 1,000 feet per minute, then 1,500. The Oscar circled above him, watching, waiting. Then the engine caught fire. In liquid-cooled aircraft engines, fire follows a predictable pattern. First, leaking coolant vaporizes and ignites. Flames spread forward along the cowling, pulled by airflow. If the fire reaches the fuel lines running along the left side of the engine, the aircraft explodes. Adair had perhaps 30 seconds. Standard procedure called for immediate engine shutdown and bailout, but he was only 8,000 feet up, descending rapidly, and 12 miles from friendly territory over jungle where Japanese patrols operated. He stayed in the aircraft. The Allison allowed manual mixture control. Adair pulled the mixture lever back to idle cutoff for 3 seconds, starving the engine of fuel. The flames weakened. He pushed the mixture forward again. The engine coughed, then caught, running roughly. Power output dropped to about 60%. Not enough to climb, barely enough to hold altitude. He was committed now. Either fly home in a burning, crippled fighter or abandon it over enemy territory. The Sally bombers were 13 miles from Dinjan. They were still close enough to turn back and try again, but their formations had collapsed. Individual bombers were turning southeast toward Burma. The raid was over. The airfield was safe. Adair turned southwest toward his base at Nagili, 43 miles away. About 15 minutes of flight time, if the engine lasted. 6 Oscars followed him. At 7,000 feet, his oil pressure dropped to 0. The Allison relied on oil pressure to lubricate its crankshaft, connecting rods, and camshaft. Without it, metal ground against metal. Friction created heat. Heat caused expansion. Parts seized. Adair felt the vibration worsen. The propeller began to windmill unevenly. Power dropped again. His airspeed fell to 180 miles per hour. The P-40 stall speed was 120. The margin between controlled flight and falling was shrinking fast. Behind him, the Oscars closed to 400 yards. They did not fire. They were waiting for the engine to die completely, waiting for him to bail out or crash. One Oscar pulled alongside, so close that Adair could clearly see the pilot's face inside the canopy. The Japanese pilot pointed downward with his hand. Land the aircraft. Surrender. Become a prisoner. Adair did not respond. At 6,000 feet, smoke began filling the cockpit. It was no longer coming from the engine fire, but from burning electrical wiring behind the instrument panel. The rounds that had torn through his fuselage had severed control cables and damaged the electrical system. The smoke stung his eyes and burned his throat. He slid the canopy open. The rush of air cleared some of the smoke, but the violent slipstream made breathing difficult. His airspeed dropped to 160 miles per hour. The Oscars pulled back. They were not going to waste ammunition. The American pilot was already finished. His aircraft was crippled. The engine was failing. He would crash in the jungle. They climbed higher and began circling, watching him descend. At 4,000 feet, the right aileron control cable finally snapped. The aileron slammed to full deflection. The P-40 rolled violently to the right, and the nose dropped into a steep dive. Adair pulled back on the control stick with both hands. Nothing happened. The elevator cables were damaged as well. He had no pitch control. The nose stayed down. His airspeed climbed rapidly. 200 miles per hour, 220, 250. The jungle rushed upward. Altitude, 3,000 feet, 2,500, 2,000. He was about to die. Then an idea hit him. The damaged aileron was forcing the right wing downward. The broken elevator cables left the horizontal stabilizer trimmed nose down. Gravity and airflow were pulling the aircraft into an uncontrollable dive. But aerodynamics worked both ways. If he rolled the aircraft inverted, the damaged aileron would force the right wing upward instead of down. The elevator, stuck in nose-down trim, would now push the tail down and lift the nose. Flying upside down would reverse the effect of the damage. What was killing him upright might save him inverted. At 1,800 feet above the jungle, Adair rolled the P-40 completely upside down. Negative G-forces pressed him hard against his shoulder straps. Blood rushed to his head. His vision darkened and turned red around the edges. The fuel system, designed for positive G loads, struggled to feed fuel while inverted. The Allison engine coughed, sputtered, nearly quit, then caught again, running rough but still producing power. The nose began to rise. The descent slowed. At 1,200 feet, the P-40 leveled out, flying upside down at 140 miles per hour. Adair held the inverted attitude for 40 seconds. His airspeed crept up to 160. He was climbing slowly at 50 feet per minute, but he was climbing. Then fuel starvation returned. The engine began to cut out again. He rolled upright. Instantly, the damage controls forced the nose down. The P-40 descended once more at 600 feet per minute. Adair waited until he lost 300 feet, then rolled inverted again. The nose lifted. He climbed 200 feet before fuel starvation forced him to roll upright once more. The pattern continued. Upside down to climb. Right side up to let the fuel system work. Flip, climb. Flip, descend. Flip, climb. The 6 Oscar fighters circling above watched in disbelief. An American P-40 with a burning engine and shattered controls was flying alternately inverted and upright, refusing to crash, claw over altitude like a wounded animal that refused to die. One Oscar dove closer to investigate. Adair saw it coming. He rolled inverted to gain altitude, then rolled upright directly toward the Japanese fighter. The Oscar broke away immediately. The American pilot was either insane or possessed by pure desperation. Either way, the Oscars decided not to engage further. They turned east toward Burma and disappeared. Adair continued his rolling climb toward Nagali. His fuel gauge showed 83 gallons remaining. His oil pressure gauge still read 0. It had been pinned there for 9 minutes. The engine should have seized long ago. The connecting rods should have welded themselves to the crankshaft. The fact that it still ran defied mechanical logic. The Allison was surviving on momentum, friction, and whatever microscopic film of oil still clung to its internal parts. His altitude passed 3,000 feet, then 4,000. Nagali Airfield lay 21 miles to the southwest, about 11 minutes away if he could maintain his current speed. His coolant temperature gauge no longer registered at all. The needle had melted off at some point. Smoke still poured from the cowling, but the flames had faded. Either the fire had burned through everything it could, or the lack of coolant had finally starved it. At 5,000 feet, Adair spotted Nagali ahead. The runway, the control tower, the revetments, safety. But a new problem appeared. His landing gear was hydraulically operated. The hydraulic system depended on engine power. His engine was barely producing anything and could die at any second. If he lowered the gear and the engine quit, he would fall short of the runway with the gear half deployed. If he kept the gear up and attempted a belly landing, the impact could rupture his remaining fuel tanks and turn the aircraft into a fireball. He needed the landing gear down and locked before the engine failed. Adair reached for the gear lever. His right hand was shaking, not from fear, but from carbon monoxide poisoning. Smoke had been filling the cockpit for 14 minutes. He pulled the lever down. Nothing happened. The P-40's hydraulic system operated at 1,000 pounds per square inch. Hydraulic fluid, pressurized by an engine-driven pump, flowed through steel lines of actuators that extended and retracted the landing gear. With the engine producing almost no power, the pump could not generate enough pressure. The gear stayed locked in the up position. The P-40 had a backup system, a manual hand pump mounted on the left side of the cockpit. 28 strokes of the handle would generate enough pressure to lower the landing gear manually. Adair grabbed the pump handle with his left hand while keeping his right hand on the control stick. He pumped. 1, 2, 3. Nothing. The gear remained up. The hand pump required both hands to work effectively, but releasing the control stick meant losing control of the aircraft. His damaged ailerons and elevator would immediately drive the nose downward. He reached behind his seat and loosened his lap belt. He wrapped it around the control stick, looped it through the seat frame, and pulled it tight. The improvised harness held the stick in place, just enough to keep the aircraft marginally stable. Stick in a roughly neutral position. It wasn't perfect control, but it was enough to keep the aircraft flying more or less straight. Adair grabbed the hand pump with both hands and began pumping hard. 5 strokes. 10. 15. At stroke 23, he finally felt resistance as hydraulic pressure began to build. At stroke 28, he heard a heavy thump beneath the cockpit. The left main landing gear extended and locked. 3 seconds later, the right main gear followed. The P-40 immediately became sluggish and drag-heavy. With the gear down, drag increased dramatically. His airspeed dropped from 160 miles per hour to 135. Still above stall speed, but not by much. The engine was now producing perhaps 40% power, barely enough to hold altitude with the gear extended. Nagli's runway lay 7 miles ahead. 3 minutes. His vision began to tunnel. Gray shadows crept in from the edges. Carbon monoxide poisoning was affecting his brain. He shook his head and forced his eyes to focus on a thin strip of runway ahead. 6 miles. The only temperature gauge still working showed 310 degrees, far beyond the red line. Inside the engine, metal parts were expanding. Clearances were vanishing. Any second, a piston could seize, a valve could stick, or a connecting rod could snap. 5 miles. The tower operators at Nagli saw him coming. P-40 trailing smoke, flying erratically, landing gear already down. They assumed he would make a normal approach. Flaps down, speed reduced, smooth touchdown. Standard procedure. But Adair's flaps were hydraulic too. With almost no engine power, he couldn't generate enough pressure to operate both gear and flaps. The gear was down. The flaps stayed up. Landing without flaps meant a much higher touchdown speed, about 120 miles per hour instead of 90. That meant a longer landing roll. Nagli's runway was 4,000 feet long. A flapless landing in a damaged aircraft needed at least 3,000 feet. It was possible, but only if he touched down smoothly and the engine kept running. At 2 miles from the runway, the engine quit. The propeller windmilled to a stop. No power, no thrust. The P-40 became a glider, a very poor glider. The Warhawk's glide ratio was about 8-to-1. From 2,000 feet, he could theoretically glide 3 miles. The runway was 2 miles away. On paper, it was possible, but his aircraft was riddled with damage. Bullet holes in the wings and fuselage disrupted airflow. Drag was far worse than normal. His real glide ratio was closer to 6-to-1. He wasn't going to make it. He was going to crash short into the jungle after everything he had survived, after fighting 64 enemy aircraft, after flying inverted for minutes at a time, after nursing a dying engine across hostile territory. He would crash 200 yards from safety because the engine died at the worst possible moment. Then he remembered something from training, something an instructor had once mentioned about the P-40's glide performance, something about inverted flight. In normal flight, an aircraft glides nose down, gravity pulling it forward and downward while the wings generate lift. Inverted, the aerodynamics reverse. The wing shape that produces lift upright creates downward force when upside down. But at certain angles of attack, this configuration can generate less drag than upright flight. An inverted glide could, in theory, extend range slightly by reducing drag. It had been mentioned only briefly. No instructor expected a pilot to actually try it. Adair had nothing to lose. At 1,800 feet, 1 mile from the runway, he rolled the P-40 inverted. Blood rushed to his head. His vision darkened and swam. He held the aircraft upside down, watching the jungle pass above him or below him, his sense of direction completely distorted. His airspeed stabilized at 125 miles per hour. The descent rate dropped to about 500 feet per minute, better than the 700 feet per minute he had been losing upright. The tower crew at Nagli stared in disbelief. An inverted P-40, landing gear extended, smoke trailing. Gear down flight, while inverted, was aerodynamically wrong and structurally dangerous. The gear doors, designed to take air loads from below, were now being forced from above, but the landing gear held. On the ground, a crew chief named Technical Sergeant Robert Martinez watched through binoculars. He saw the inverted aircraft. He saw the gear down. He saw the smoke. His first thought was that a Japanese pilot had somehow stolen a P-40 and was attempting to attack the airfield. Martinez ran toward the nearest .50 caliber machine gun position. 3 other ground crewmen followed him. They reached the gun emplacement and began swinging the weapon toward the approaching aircraft. Adair was now at 400 feet, half a mile from the runway, still inverted. His vision was fading. Gray tunnels closed in. Carbon monoxide poisoning and negative G-forces were shutting his brain down. He had maybe 20 seconds of consciousness left. He had to roll upright, line up with the runway, and land. But if he rolled upright too early, the damage controls would drive the nose down, and he would crash short. If he rolled too late, he would overshoot the runway. At 200 feet, 300 yards from the threshold, Adair rolled right side up. The damaged aileron immediately forced the right wing down. He fought it with left stick, forcing the wings level. The nose wanted to drop. He pulled back. The broken elevator cables gave him only partial authority. Not much, just enough. The P-40 dropped toward the runway at a steep angle, nose high, wings shuddering. Martinez's gun crew tracked the aircraft. It was definitely damaged. Smoke poured from it. It might be friendly. It might be enemy. In 3 seconds, it would cross the runway threshold. Martinez had to decide. Shoot or hold fire. He held fire. Adair crossed the threshold at 90 feet, descending fast. Too fast. Too steep. The P-40 dropped the final 90 feet in 4 seconds. The main wheels slammed into the concrete. A 7G impact. The struts compressed completely. The tailwheel hit hard. Metal screamed. The right main gear collapsed. The right wing dropped. The wingtip struck the runway and dug in. The aircraft ground looped violently to the right, spinning nearly 180 degrees, throwing sparks and chunks of concrete. It skidded backward for 200 feet and came to a stop. Smoke poured from the engine compartment. Fire crews raced toward the wreck. Adair sat motionless in the cockpit for 12 long seconds. Then he released his shoulder harness, pushed himself upright, and climbed out onto the wing. His legs gave way beneath him. He caught himself on the wing root just in time. Ground crew rushed forward and helped him down to the concrete. Martinez arrived moments later with the fire crew. They opened the engine cowling. The Allison was completely destroyed. Pistons were seized. The crankshaft was warped. The oil pan had ruptured. Coolant was everywhere. The engine had cooked itself to death. Adair and Martinez walked slowly around the aircraft, counting the damage. 16 bullet holes in the fuselage, 7 in the right wing, 4 in the left. 1 round had completely severed the right aileron control cable. Another had punctured the hydraulic reservoir. A third had sliced through 2 electrical wiring bundles behind the instrument panel. The engine had suffered catastrophic damage from overheating and total oil starvation. Every cylinder showed deep scoring. 3 connecting rods had actually welded themselves to the crankshaft. The coolant system was destroyed beyond repair. Lulu Belle would never fly again. But Philip Adair had saved Dinjan Airfield. Intelligence reports confirmed that all 24 Sally bombers had turned back without dropping their ordnance. The Japanese formation had scattered 15 miles short of its target. 40 Oscar fighters escorted empty bombers back toward Burma. 0 bombs struck Allied facilities. 0 casualties were suffered on the ground. All 14 C-47 transports remained operational. The hump airlift continued without interruption. On December 16, 1943, 3 days after the mission, headquarters of the 10th Air Force interviewed Adair in detail. He described the attack sequence, the inverted flying technique, and the landing approach. Flight surgeons examined him. Carbon monoxide levels in his blood were still dangerously elevated 72 hours later. They concluded that he had been flying under severe carbon monoxide poisoning during the final 11 minutes of the flight. At that level, he should have been unconscious. He had remained functional through sheer willpower alone. On January 8, 1944, Lieutenant General Joseph Stilwell, commander of U.S. forces in the China-Burma-India theater, presented Second Lieutenant Philip Adair with the Silver Star. The citation read, "For gallantry in action against enemy forces on December 13, 1943, when Lieutenant Adair, flying alone, engaged in disruptive formation of 64 enemy aircraft attacking Allied installations, continuing his attack despite severe aircraft damage and personal injury, thereby preventing the destruction of critical supply facilities. Adair would go on to fly 95 more combat missions with the 80th Fighter Group. He achieved A status with 5 confirmed aerial victories. On his final mission in July 1944, he shot down 2 key 43 Oscars over northern Burma. He returned to the United States in September 1944, survived the war, and remained in the Air Force for 30 years. He retired as a full colonel in 1971. The 80th Fighter Group, known as the Burma Banshees, continued combat operations until August 1945. They destroyed 413 Japanese aircraft in the air and another 147 on the ground. They lost 63 pilots killed or missing. Their Death's Head skull insignia became one of the most recognizable symbols of the China-Burma-India theater. The P-40 Warhawk never gained the fame of the P-51 Mustang or the P-47 Thunderbolt. It was slower than both. It could not fight effectively above 15,000 feet. By 1943, many considered it obsolete, but in the hands of determined pilots like Philip Adair, the rugged Curtiss fighter proved that what mattered most in combat was not the aircraft specifications. It was the courage and skill of the pilot flying it. One pilot, one obsolete fighter, 64 enemy aircraft. On December 13, 1943, Philip Adair proved that impossible odds mean nothing when someone refuses to quit. His solution to damage controls, flying alternately inverted and upright for 11 minutes, defied every standard rule of aviation. His inverted landing approach with the landing gear extended had never been attempted before and was never repeated again. That is the story of the Burma Banshees, and the day one P-40 pilot disrupted an entire Japanese air raid. If stories like this remind you why we preserve history, hit that like button, subscribe for more forgotten heroes, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss these stories. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from and whether anyone in your family served in the CBI theater. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next